स्वागत है जी आप सभी का हमारी एक और नई वीडियो के अंदर। तो कैसे हो आप सभी लोग? आई होप सभी अच्छे होंगे। तो आज हमने उठा लिया है हिस्ट्री का चैप्टर 7 वुमेन कास्ट एंड रिफॉर्म। पिछली वीडियो में पहले हमने इसका 8 चैप्टर की रीडिंग करी थी। द मेकिंग ऑफ क्या था भी आते हैं द मेकिंग ऑफ नेशनल मूवमेंट, और आज 7 चैप्टर पढ़ रहे हैं वुमेन कास्ट एंड रिफॉर्म। Have you ever thought of how children live about 200 years ago? Nowadays, most girls from middle class families goes to school and often study with boys. On growing up, many of them go to colleges and universities and take up jobs after that. They have to be adults before they are legally married, and according to law, they can marry anyone they like from any caste and community, and widows can remarry too. All women, like all men, can vote and stand for elections. Of course, these fights are not actually enjoyed by all. Poor people have little or no access to education, and in many families women can't choose their husbands. 200 years ago, things were very different. Most children were married off at an early age. Before, both Hindu and Muslim men could marry more than one wife. In some parts of the country, widows were praised if they choose death by burning themselves on the funeral pyre of their husbands. Women who died in the manner, when whether willingly or otherwise, were called sati, meaning virtuous women. Women's right to property were also restricted. Besides, in many parts of the country, people believed that if a woman was educated, she would become a widow. Differences between men and women were not the only ones in society. In most religions, people were divided along lines of caste. Brahmins and Christians considered themselves as upper caste. Others, such as traders and money lenders, often referred to as Vaishyas, were placed after them. Then came peasants and artisans, such as weavers and potters, referred to as Shudras. At the least run at the lowest run were those who labored to keep cities and villages clean, or worked at jobs that upper caste consider polluting. That is, it could lead to the loss of caste status. The upper caste also treated they were not allowed to enter temples, draw water from the wells used by the upper caste, or bath in ponds where upper caste bathed. They were seen as inferior human beings. Over the 19th and 20th century, many of those norms and perceptions slowly changed. Let us see how this happened. Working towards change. From the early 19th century, we find debates and discussions about social customs and practices taking on a new character. One important reason for this was the development of new forms of communication. For the first time, books, newspapers, magazines, leaflets, and pamphlets were printed. These were far cheaper and far more accessible than the manuscripts that you have read about in class 7th. Therefore, ordinary people could read these, and many of them could also write and express their ideas in their own languages. All kind of issues, social ideas in their own languages. All kind of issues, social, political, economic, and religious, could now be debated and discussed by men and sometimes by the women as well. As in the new cities, the discussion could reach out to a wider public and could become linked to movements for social change. These debates were often initiated by Indian reformers and reform groups. One such reformer was Raja Rammohan Roy. He founded a reform association known as the Brahmo Sabha, later known as the Brahmo Samaj, in Calcutta. People such as Rammohan Roy are described as reformers because they felt that changes were necessary in society and unjust practices needed to be done away with. They thought that the best way to ensure such changes was by persuading people to give up old practices and adopt a new way of life. Rammohan Roy was keen to spread the knowledge of Western education in the country and bring about greater freedom and equality for women. He wrote about the way women were forced to bear the burden of domestic work, confined to the home and the kitchen, and not allowed to move out and become educated, changing the lives of widows. Rammohan Roy was particularly moved by the problems widows faced in their lives. He became a companion against the practice of sati. Rammohan Roy was well versed and in Sanskrit, Persian, and several other Indian and European languages. He tried to show through his writings that the practice of widow burning had no sanction in ancient texts. By the early 19th century, as you have read in chapter 6, many British officials had also begun to criticize Indian traditional and custom. They were therefore more than willing to listen to Ram Mohan, who was reputed to be a learned man. In 1829, Sati was banned. The strategy adopted by Ram Mohan was used by later reformers as well. Whenever they wished to challenge a practice that seemed harmful, they tried to find a verse or sentence in the ancient sacred text that supported their point of view. They then suggested that the practice as it existed at present was against early tradition. यहाँ से करते हैं. For instance, one of the most famous reformers, Ishwachandra Vidyasagar, used the ancient text to suggest the widows could remarry. His suggestion was adopted by British officials and a law was passed in 1856 permitting widow remarriage. Those who were against the remarriage of widows opposed Vidyasagar and even boycotted him. By the second half of the 19th century, the movement in favor of widow remarriage spread to other parts of the country. In the Telugu-speaking areas of the Madras Presidency, Salingam Pantulu formed an association for widow remarriage. Around the same time, young intellectuals and reformers in Bay pledged themselves to working for the same cause in the north. Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who founded the reform association called Arya Samaj, also supported widow remarriage, yet the number of widows who actually remarried remained low. Those who married were not easily accepted in society, and conservative groups continued to oppose the new law. Girls began going to school. Many of the reformers felt that education for the girl was necessary in order to improve the condition of women. Vidyasagar in Calcutta and many other reformers in Mumbai set up schools for girls. When the first school people were afraid of them, they feared that school would take girl away from home. prevent them from doing their domestic duties. Moreover, girls had to travel through public places in order to reach school. Many people felt that this would have a corrupting influence on them. They felt that girls should stay away from public spaces, therefore, thought out the 19th century most educated women were taught at home by liberal fathers or husbands. Sometimes women thought themselves. Do you remember what you read about Rush Sundari Devi in your book Social and Political Life last year? She was one of those who secretly learned to read and write in the flickering light of candles and at night. In the latter part of the century, schools for girls were established by the R.S. Maji in Punjab and Jyoti Rao Phule in Maharashtra. In aristocratic Muslim households in North India, women learned to read the Korean in Arabic. They were taught by women who came from home to reach to teach. Some reformers such as Mumtaz Ali reinterpreted verses from the Quran to argue for women's education. The first Urdu novels began to be things. These were meant to encourage women to read about religion and domestic management in a language they could understand. Women write about women. From the early 17th century, Muslim women like Begums of Bhopal played a notable role in promoting education among primary school. They founded as primary school for girls at Aligarh. Another remarkable woman, Begum Rokia Shakhawat Hossain, started school for Muslim girls in Patna and Kolkata. She was fearless critic of conservative ideas, arguing that religious leaders of every faith accorded an inferior place to women. By the 1880s, Indian women began to enter universities. Some of them trained to be doctors, some become teachers. Many women began to write and published their critical views on the place of women in society. Tarabai Shinde, a woman educated at a home of Pune, published a book, Stri Purush Tulna, a comparison between women and men, criticizing the social difference between men and women, man dominant society. Pandita Ramabai, a great scholar of Sanskrit, felt that Hinduism was oppressive towards women and wrote a book about the miserable lives of upper caste Hindu women. She founded a widows' home at Pune to provide shelter to widows who had been treated badly by their husbands' relatives. Here, women were trained so that they could support themselves economically. Needless to say, all these more than alarmed the Orthodox. For instance, many nationalists that felt that Hindu women were adopting Western ways and that this would corrupt Hindu culture and erode family values. Orthodox Muslims were also worried about the impact of these changes. As you can see, by the end of 19th century, women themselves were actively working for reform. They wrote book, edited magazines, founded schools and training centers, and set up women's association. From the early 20th century, they founded political pressure group to push through laws for female suffrage and better health care and education for women. Some of them joined various kind of nationalist and socialist movements for the 1920s. In the 20th century, leaders such as Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose lent their support to demands for greater equality and freedom for women. Nationalist leader promised that there would be full suffrage for all men and women after independence. However, till then they asked women to concentrate on the anti-British struggles. कास्ट एंड सोशल रिफॉर्मर से कल पढ़ेंगे, तब तक के लिए बाय बाय।